talking now to someone who has quite an association with the mentors, and in particular, Lord Kif. I would like to introduce designer Phil Newman. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you, Alex.
Good, you keeping yourself busy?
Trying to, yeah. Bit of writing and catching up with stuff that I haven't had a chance to catch up with. But yeah, the theatre industry isn't happening at the moment, so it's all a bit weird. But hey.
Yes, very, very odd times we're in at the moment. But am I right in thinking your first sort of association with Lord Kif was in Dimensions in Time?
Yes, I guess it was. I mean, I bought the costume at the Big Bonhams auction a few years beforehand, and I hadn't bought it to ever think about wearing it. It was just I wanted to get something from that auction because it was such a landmark event, really. And yeah, it was. I think it was in the summer of '93. Must have been August, maybe July, August. I think there was a little thing in Celestial Toy Room, because I was still a DWAS member then, from JNT effectively saying if any fans have got costumes and want to take part in a Children in Need based thing, to write in. And I mean, I used to do some of the news editing on CT for a little while in the mid to late 80s. So I knew JNT, didn't know him well, but I knew him. We'd met several times and all of that, and I'd interviewed him a couple of times. But I was half expecting them to say no. But anyway, I got a letter back saying it's filming on these 2 days in September. You bring everything with you. You know, your own makeup, your own this, that, and the other, you know, because the focus is on the artists, and just turn up at Elstree, and you'll be needed on this, you know. But I went down with a friend of mine who was dressed up as an Argolin in that as well, because I had to stay over because I was living in Basingstoke at the time. I was still in the off-license trade then, and but actually it turned when we turned up, I think they just filmed Colin Baker's bits with Sophie, and we were told, you know, that they were going to be doing the monsters next, kind of thing. So we were all ushered into had to get into costume, and must have been one of the makeup assistants on it. Obviously saw me because I had this green cowl on my head, and I was in because you have to put the costume on like a backwards jacket, like that. And obviously I was holding the tail out in front to stop it wearing up the shoulders and all of that kind of thing. But one of the makeup assistants must have worked on Mind War because she saw it and said, "Oh, I did that. Come in." And so I even though we were told, no, you got to do your own makeup and everything. I got taken in, and Andy, who's a prop maker as well, had made the new sort of frill thing that goes around the head and the join between the head and the face, and so I got made up properly by BBC makeup artists alongside John Pertwee. So that was fun. And then, yeah, we just did the various scenes, you know, we just did the various scenes. I remember walking around, it must have been later on in the day when they did the Pat Wicks moment, you know, with Peter Davison and Nicola and Sarah. And I was walking around, you know, carrying the tail out in front and stuff like that, all obviously still in full makeup. And turned the corner and she sort of was coming the other way, and she sort of stopped, like, "I think someone's having a bit of a laugh with you, love." But yeah, it was great. It was very funny, but just great fun. Yeah, great fun experience. But they were under a lot of pressure to do a lot in a very short space of time.
So were your bits all done effectively in one day?
Yeah, well, we did the first day, and that concentrated mostly on the on the stuff with the various monsters, and there were a couple that didn't make it to the screen. You know, there was like a Dalek. Roger Dilley brought his Dalek, and there was a Dalek trooper, but because they didn't get permission from, or they couldn't get a deal with the nation estate or something like that, I don't know. Anyway, so they couldn't be on screen, but Roger features as a passerby in a couple of scenes. But yeah, so we did all that in the one day, and that was the same day I think that Kate O'Mara was there. Very, very quickly, because she had to go off and be in a show. So literally she came in, did her stuff, and had to go. And it was like that with all of the artists, you know, they had to be done really quite quickly. I think John Pertwee was the only one that was there on both days at Albert Square. 'Cause they'd done the filming the day before. I think our days were Wednesday and Thursday. On the Tuesday, they'd done the shots with Tom in a different studio somewhere else.
Would you have had a great deal to do with the director, Stuart MacDonald, or was you just sort of left to get on with it?
No, I mean, you know, we were told, you know, don't hassle, because there were quite a group of us there. I think there's about 14 or 15 of us who turned up in various different outfits, and you know, we were just told just to behave ourselves really effectively, you know, because John was obviously there. John Nathan Turner and Gary Downey was the PA on it, and there was a lot to do, and it was very technical. The 3D process meant that there always had to be something in the foreground, the midground, and the background, and the camera was always moving. But they weren't remote cameras, they had cables. And so it was quite technical in terms of actually getting some of these scenes shot. I mean, I certainly remember the scene where John Pertwee is walking through with Liz Sladen. Well, he starts off with Bonnie Langford, and then, which confused him no end, walking down through the Market Street, because the poor there was the guy with the camera, and there was the sound guy, and then there was also like the cable runner who was having to literally sort of on his crouch down and move around and around as the camera was going round and round. And then there was the odd cue card here and there for Mr. P. And, you know, so it was quite technical. And so there was no time for any funny business, you know, and they said no autographs, no photos or anything like that. I mean, I couldn't really have taken a picture very easily in Kiev anyway. But yeah, but it was, and I remember when they were doing the shot that I was sort of in first, I think, because I was carrying this tail around in front of me, and I thought, well, and I just lined it up, and there was a green litter bin next to the fruit and veg stall. And I just sort of plonked the tail on there, standing behind it. And it was just quite at the right height. So I just sort of sat there and thought, oh, well, I'll be here. And they all gave that the nod. But then when they were shooting through the stall with Fifi in the foreground, they couldn't see me. And so we relocated the bin to the other side of the fruit and veg stall. So you could just see me in the back of the shot as the camera panned across. And then when they did that sort of swooping shot across all of the monsters lined up outside the Queen Vic, the first, I was still sat, I was still on the bin, you know, still by the bin. And they did the one take of this, and I thought, hang on a minute, I'm not in this. Because they were all lined up in front of me, and the camera was on the crane going past. And Gary Dow said, oh, no, we need to get you in as well. And so just for that brief moment in that thing, Kiv levitates. And you can just see me popping my head across the back.
How is the costume to work with? Because, of course, at that point, it wasn't that old, so probably still quite usable, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it's still fair. I mean, even now, it's still fairly supple. Yes, it's got a few rips and tears, but I mean, it's 34 years old now, you know. Yeah, amazing. It's still in one piece pretty much. But yeah, it was quite supple. You had to use loads of talcum powder, really. You had to fill the arms with talcum powder because it was just like quite claggy foam latex. So, but it was sort of just done up with a bit of gaffer tape at the back. But it was outdoors, and it was September, so temperature-wise, it was fine. Going to the cafeteria at lunchtime was a little bit strange because I think I could take the costume off, but I still had to keep the head on because I had all the makeup. So, so I had to go to the canteen with the head in green.
How did the various EastEnders, both cast and supporting artists, take to all this? Were they a bit bemused by it all?
No, they were really keen. Yeah, they were really excited. I remember Gillian Tailforth being very friendly and just coming up and just chatting to us, a little bit. But they were being slotted in between stuff that they were recording in the studio for EastEnders. So it was literally when they had a break, they came on set. It was, and that's why I think Adam Woodyard, you just see him walking past in a shot, because they hadn't written anything for him. There were a few, obviously, who were freer, and so they actually wrote little scenes for them, a few lines of dialogue. But there were others who just wanted to be there and be in it, and so anyone who was free just came along, and they just kind of just got them to walk through shot and stuff like that. But I think they were all quite excited. I mean, Mike Reed had already been in Doctor Who, so as like a sort of stuntman extra, hadn't he, in the War Machines and things. So. Yeah, I think everyone was quite up for it. The funniest moment, really, was I think this, because when we finished at the end of the first day, Gary Downey came up to us and said, "Oh, well done, and J&T, I think you've all done really well. You worked really hard, and stuff like that. If any of you are free, you're welcome to come back tomorrow and just be background artists walking around in the background." And so a few of us did. And so the following morning, I got dressed up because they were doing the 2013 segments the following morning in like an Astrakhan hat and these ponchos that Ken True had decided was the fashion of 2013, 20 years in the future. And I can remember the route I had to take in various shots. I think that was the shot when Pertwee was also walking through with Liz Sladen on that second day, I think. And there was certainly the shot I was walking. I had to wait a few minutes when Sharon came out, all dressed up a bit like Bette Lynch. That's what she said. She said, "I've always wanted to be Bette Lynch." When she came out of the pub. And me and I think it was Andy had to walk past the pub and then turn the corner and walk down past the laundrette because the action was sort of continuous and they had to keep edited together. And at that point then John was walking down through doing his dialogue. But I do remember when Wendy Richard turned up on set and Gillian Tailforth made up as their older selves. And they were doing their scene with John by the fruit and veg stall. And I think they did a couple of takes of that, 2 or 3 takes of that. And then they were just sort of chatting in a little huddle. And John just kept looking at Wendy because they knew each other, I think, from theatre and stuff like that. And he kept looking at it and he put his arm around Wendy. Are you all right? Because you're not looking very well today. And she said, "What are you talking about, you silly old sod? I've been made up to look 80. Bless him.
The key question is, do you think Dimensions in Time is canonical? Should we be celebrating it with a DVD release?
Of course it's canon. It was broadcast on BBC One. Doctor Who. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I'll argue that with anybody. Primetime BBC One on 2 consecutive nights.
More recently, you've been involved with Syl and the Devil Seeds of Andor, which again brought you back into contact with Lord Kiv, but this time as a production designer. How was it sort of imagining the worlds of the mentors and Philip Martin's script?
Well, I mean, it was fantastic. I mean, it was just weird to start off with, just the fact that, you know, having bought that costume and then being in Dimensions in Time, you think, and then it goes in the cupboard and where it's been sat for ever since, really. But then I sort of brought it along for when Chris Ryan was doing the Myth Makers for Keith, and we had only just started talking about the project at that point. But then to get to design Kiv's next costume was just like, whoa, that's a strange circle being coming round there of all the characters in Doctor Who, you know. But yeah, no, I mean, it was quite surreal, but it was really thrilling. You know, it was really thrilling working with such lovely people, and everyone was lovely. Keith assembled a really lovely team of people because we were doing it on, you know, a very tight schedule, you know, a 5-day shoot, in a studio that probably wasn't more than about 10 meters square or 12 meters square or something like that. It was quite limited, but you work within those limitations. So, you know, that's part of, you know, as a stage designer, that's what you do with touring shows. When you design and build things so that they can go in and out of venues of different sizes and contract or expand or be reconfigured, and so it kind of all, when you know what you've got to work with, then you work within those parameters. But yeah, but it was a thrill, and Chris is such a lovely guy, you know, so self-effacing and gentle, and you know, but he just like that, you know, back to Lord Kiv, and he hadn't rewatched his performance. He hadn't rewatched it, you know. He just went back into character just like that, just like Nabil. I mean, they all did, you know. And it was, yeah, it was an absolute privilege to be involved in it and to do it, you know, to work with Sophie Aldred, you know, and create her first alien costume. Who could have predicted that? You know, it's lovely.
And of course, for that, you were not only designing the sets, but the costume. Is that quite common for your work, or is it normally one or the other?
It's usually a mixture, really. Usually do both. Yeah, usually set and costume. Sometimes just one, sometimes just the other. It really just varies. Yeah, there's no common thing to it. But I always think it works better when you're doing both, just because, you know, ideas from a character might influence the set and the setting and vice versa. It kind of, you know, they sort of feed into each other. But when you're collaborating with you know, with either a set designer or a costume designer, then you just want to make sure that you're working to the same end, to, you know, for the actual end product, so it all fits. I mean, and you know, going back to what you're saying about the mentors, we were actually on a lunar colony base. It wasn't actually Thoros Beta or anything like that. So, and Kiv had transferred to a different body, so it was more about creating a costume that fitted the person that Kiv's brain had gone into, if you like. The fact that it happened to look like Christopher Ryan again, it's just a massive coincidence. But yeah, no, it was a really happy shoot, and it's lovely that it's still, you know, that it's been successful as well. I guess we've had a few awards come our way in the last few months, which is lovely.
Yeah, the appreciation for it just seems to be growing and growing, which is fantastic to see. And
Yeah.
What do you think your younger self would say if they knew that one day not only would they own the costume, they'd be designing for Sophie, and you know, what would you think your younger self would have made of all this?
The older self hasn't quite come to terms with it yet. I don't know. It's so surreal. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's just a bit bizarre, but lovely bizarre.
Well, I think on the note of bizarre, yes, to say a lovely bizarre, it's a perfect point to say thank you very much for your time, Phil. It's been lovely to talk to you about some of your contact with Doctor Who.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you.